Hello and welcome back to another update as we cover the latest developments throughout the front line in the Russo-Ukrainian war. We start out here in the direction of Terny, where the Russians have launched an armored assault, storming the village of Terny here to the west of Krymky in the Luhansk, Kharkiv, Donetsk border, where we see that the Russians are now attacking the village of Terny. With this, we are seeing that this is the biggest developments since the Russians attacked in the direction of Zarishne and Torske last year. With this, the Russians have now finished their attacks and positional fighting in the forest areas and have decided to start attacking the village itself. With these developments, we are now entering a new stage where the Russians will be focusing around attacking their villages here by the Serebets river line, where they will try to capture everything to the east of it. We're likely going to see more assaults towards the villages here by the Serebets river and to the west of Krymky in general. The main focus will be Terny and Orlivka at the start, before it expands southwards and northwards to other villages in the river line. The Russians will look to capture everything east to the river line before developing the situation further to restart offensive operations in the direction of Liman here to the west of the river line. This will enter a new stage of the fighting here in the northern parts of the front line. We then move on to the Avdiivka section of the front line, where fighting continues in the villages of Torske, Orlivka and bridgehead, where the Russians to the northwestern parts of Orlivka continue pressuring the Ukrainian positions here and try to push them out of the village, and the Ukrainians are counterattacking to try and hold on to their positions in the outskirts of the village and prevent the Russians from gaining full control over the village. In the northern parts, positional fighting is taking place in the forest areas, leaving the whole area in the gray zone, as Russians are looking to gain full control over the road into Semenivka and the forest areas to the south of it. In the northern parts by bridgehead, we see here that the Russians are looking to continue fighting and capturing the village. However, they're facing the most resistance in that village. Moving further south here in the direction of Orlivka, the Russians are attacking in the northern flank of the town. And with this, we are seeing that they are launching the final assaults to gain full control over the northern parts of Orlivka before moving down south to connect with the central parts and assault further within the village itself. We're seeing constant assaults by the Russians throughout the front line to try and improve their positions and continue assaulting the Ukrainian positions in an attempt to gain control over these towns and improve the position of the Russian side here by the south of Orlivka. If the Russians manage to capture Orlivka, they can create a front line by the river lines, which will allow them to secure the flank for further assaults towards Orlivka. They could also move further westwards towards
Макса и Миленівка
and try to push in the northern direction to flank Orlivka from the west, where the Ukrainians do not have any prepared fortifications. In addition to that, we also see from the northern flank that there's one road going into Orlivka from the north. With the Russian capture of Nevelska and positions there, they can start moving westward to cut off that road or gain fire control of it, combining that with control over Orlivka here to the south and pushing on to the road here to the west of Orlivka. The Russians could gain operational control or operational encirclement of the city and grind it down and siege it, to prevent a costly storming of the city itself, which is heavily fortified, especially to the east. We then move further south here in the direction of Robotyne, where fighting continues within the village itself. It is reported that the Russians have held positions in the post office and the school in the central parts of the village for over a week now. They've held this foothold and they are preparing and doing positional fighting for further assaults to the east, capturing the fortifications there, and to the north to capture the fortifications there. So with this, we see that there's constant fighting taking place within Robotyne, as well as the surrounding areas, now reaching a new stage where the Russians actually have a foothold within the village, which they've had for now a week. Moving on to the western parts of Kherson, we see that the Russians have started a new storming of Krynky, where they're looking to cut off the Ukrainian held positions in two, and this is being done by a Wagner unit, which has been ordered to do this, launch this operation, where they're going to be cutting Krynky into two. The storming is currently taking place, where the Russians will be looking to cut it off into two to create a difficult situation for the Ukrainians. In the sense, we already see that there are fortifications within the area, and most of the Ukrainian soldiers are hiding within the basements to prevent or avoid the heavy shelling that the Russians are launching against their positions, while at the same time the Ukrainians have artillery cover from the western bank of the Kherson area, Dnieper River area. So with this, we see that the Russians are looking to storm some of these buildings in the center, where they're looking to gain control of them and split the area into two, preventing coordination between the two sides, after which they can go at it one by one. This is a tactic which is very commonly used in the scenarios of sieges, where the sieging force splits the area into multiple parts to take them one at a time. This is also the strategy that the Israelis used in the battle against Hamas in Gaza, where we saw them entering Gaza one bit at a time, cutting it up into multiple parts. Started out by cutting off Gaza City itself from the rest of the Gaza Strip, then on to the next part before finally moving on to the Khan Yunis area, and now they are planning on attacking Rafah. And this is a very similar scenario because the form of the Gaza Strip and Krynky is practically the same. The difference is Krynky is, or the area that the Ukrainians have control of, is about 42 hectares. But we're seeing that the fighting continues in these different areas of the front line. The main fighting is taking place here to the west of Avdiivka and in the Donetsk region itself in general. But we're also seeing heavy fighting taking place by Robotyne, Krynky, and to the west of Kreminna. The areas here to the west of Kreminna, it is clear that there is multiple layers of defenses here as well. The main part is to the northwest of the Serbets River, where the Ukrainians have fortifications that go through these northwestern parts. This is to secure the flank here to the north, besides the Serbets River line. This means one of the main fortifications of the Ukrainians in the area is the river line itself. If the Russians go beyond the river line, they can attack Liman, which has multiple positions of defensive fortifications to the north of the village, in between the Russian and Ukrainian positions. However, if the Russians launch attacks and capture Liman, they would completely bypass all of the Ukrainian fortifications to the north, and they will be able to flank the Ukrainian fortifications and reach the Torske river line through the areas here by Liman. So it is likely that the Russians will be looking to gain control over the villages by the Serbets river line, push on to Liman, fight over the fortifications there, and gain control over the city, to then launch attacks further northwards towards the Torske river line, combining it with assaults towards Kupiansk here to the north, and gaining full control over the Torske river line from the north and the south, respectively. In the meantime, the Russian army is continuously building up their offensive capabilities. Shoigu has announced that in 2024, the Russian army will be expanded drastically, with the increase or the formation of 2 combined arms armies and 30 formations. The 30 formation will include 14 divisions and 16 brigades. This is around 300,000 additional soldiers. And in this, there is a flotilla being formed, a flotilla unit. This is a unit that is supposed, or the goal of it is to cross the Dnieper River. A flotilla unit is a naval unit, so there will be naval capabilities within that unit, and it will likely include pontoon bridges and ships to cross the Dnieper River in case all of the bridges are destroyed. So with that, we see that the Russians are not just creating a new army to launch an offensive to the east of the Dnieper River, but there's also an intention to cross the Dnieper River with this new army being formed throughout 2024. They are scheduled to be finishing by the end of the year. The Russians will likely create this scenario in which they can gain control over the east of the Dnieper River prior to the formation of these units, so that when they are ready, they can be used directly to storm and cross over the Dnieper River to gain control over Odessa, being their target. So with this, it is clear that the Russians are planning and forming units in preparation for a massive offensive, and they're also planning on crossing over the Dnieper River and gaining control over Odessa, and they may be looking to end the war within a year or two. And that is going to be all for this update. Thank you all for watching, and have a great day.